Looking at some wide receivers here. For quarterback, I framed it as like other than Mahomes, and for running back, I framed it as other than Cook and McCaffrey. But I'm not going to do that here. I'm just going to ask you, who has the most upside at wide receiver?
I
still
think probably Davante Adams.
I don't know if I can pick one guy that can for sure do it, but if you had to think about which receiver had the potential for the most targets, Adams would be up there, Ridley would be up there, Diggs would be up there.
Yeah.
And I think Adams is probably the safest play to say that he's got the most upside. Tyreek's got upside too. I just don't think he's got the upside to catch the most targets or see the most targets, I should say.
Yeah. Ridley's a really good call. That was probably an oversight for me because he did lead the NFL in air yards last season. He showed he could still be successful without Julio Jones last season, even with Matt Ryan struggling. The question for me is does he have that 160, 170, 10 targets per game or more upside? I would think he does without Julio Jones, but I'm not 100% sure. Whereas we have seen that from Calvin or from Davante Adams. We have seen that from Michael Thomas in particular, those two guys. Michael Thomas, he had a 1,700 yard, 150 catch season 2 years ago. Obviously the QB situation is different, but I still think he's in that discussion.
Julio leaving behind 7.55 targets per game in Atlanta.
Yeah.
No, that's got to be more than that.
That's what it is, just with the raw numbers.
Really play.
Right. I'm including those games. So if you take that out and you do 68 divided by 7, then you're looking at about 10 per game.
Right. And just here's just an important stat to know about Davante Adams. He's been on pace for 111 or more catches 3 straight years. Bam, right there. I mean, that's wild. Okay.
Yeah, I don't think Tyreek can touch that. That's why Adams remains number 1.
Who has the most downside among these elite wide receivers?
Brandon Cooks. No, nothing.
Yeah,
you want the elite wide receivers.
How are we defining it? Yeah, if it's the top 7 or 8, I think it's.
Oh, it's going to hurt to say it.
I mean, Adams, if Aaron Rodgers doesn't play, but I still think he's going to be really good.
Yeah.
Hopkins, the one interesting thing about this elite wide receiver group is it's mostly older guys. Wide receivers tend to peak at 28, and then there's like a 2-year very steady decline phase. And once you hit 31, wide receivers as a population, that's the year that they tend to really fall off. But 27, 28 is typically the best year of a wide receiver's career. Davante Adams is 28. I believe Michael Thomas is 27. Stephon Diggs is 27. DeAndre Hopkins is 28 or 29.
I think he's going to be 29.
So it's a really interesting place because I think we're probably looking at this next year, and of the, Adams, Diggs, Hopkins, Hill group, we're probably looking at 1 or 2 of them having a fall off season. And it's just a question of which one it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Hopkins is 29.
What's the answer?
Kind of a bummer.
What's the answer? Who's got the most? By the way, I think the elite wide receivers can play very well into their 30s. So I'm not worried about a 29-year-old.
I think Chris, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think you're talking about it like they turn 31 and then their legs fall off, but they're a steady decline, like you said.
Yeah, it's like,
31.
Nobody in this group is. They're 28, 29, 27 through 29. So it's
but there's a couple of young ones in here too.
Yeah, we're good.
I think it's more like what we've seen from Adam Thielen the last couple of seasons, where he can still be really
prop
good.
Him up. Right.
Yeah.
Right. And that's just a nuanced receiver who is a terrific route runner, doesn't command double coverage very often, gets schemed open. That's kind of what you need when you're an old guy. You need a Walker.
Who's got Walker? The most downside guy?
Let me give you the case for AJ Brown, which it hurts me to do because I think he's a phenomenal talent, but he's not in line for 150 targets so long as Julio Jones is healthy. If Julio Jones plays the majority of the season, that'll hurt his target volume. This is still a team that wants to run the football a lot with Derrick Henry. This is a team that will probably try and cultivate some other talent behind Julio and AJ Brown. Those two aren't going to get every single pass target from Ryan Tannehill. I think there is some downside for A.J. Brown based on his ADP.
I really love Calvin Ridley. I'll just make the case for downside for Calvin Ridley having the most downside. We haven't really seen a lot of him as a number one. And when he was the number one last year without Julio Jones, he had a lot of targets, 10 per game. He had a lot of yards. He had a very, very low touchdown rate, which you would say, whatever, small sample, but that's what happened to Julio Jones year after year. And I don't know. I mean, the Falcons could be really bad offensively now, and they might have a really bad running game, and they have an aging quarterback, and there's really no help for Calvin Ridley unless we just expect Kyle Pitts to be great. So I don't believe this. I think Ridley is in the conversation as wide receiver 3. Ultimately, I think I'd settle on him as wide receiver 5. I can't quite justify him over Diggs Hopkins, but I can make the case that there's unknown, there's uncertainty there. We haven't seen it from Ridley, so that's the case.
I'll make a case for one that might be super unpopular, but DK Metcalf. If we're including him among that elite group of wide receivers.
I wasn't, but go ahead. But I'm happy to hear this. Go ahead.
It's mostly just that among the elite or, second tier elite wide receivers, he's probably the most touchdown dependent of that group and the most big play dependent of that group. It helps having Russell Wilson. But we saw in the second half of last season, he was not an elite wide receiver after he really looked like he made that leap in the first half. He only had 2 touchdowns in his final 8 games, was only on pace for 80 catches, 1,030 yards, 13 yards per reception. Now, came back in the playoffs and had a 2 touchdown, 96 yard, 5 catch game.
Yeah.
But he's the kind of guy
against the Rams
where if he doesn't have that 40-yard touchdown, he can be disappointing on a week-to-week basis. Now, I love having him on my team because there are going to be weeks where he hits 2 of the 40-yard touchdowns and he's going to, help carry you to a win.
Yeah.
But if you're looking for a guy in the top 10 group, let's say, who could have a disappointing season that's not related to injury, that's not related to QB, I think Metcalf is probably the guy, and we saw a little bit of that in the second half last season.
Mm-hmm. And I'm really interested to see in the new system that's going to emphasize shorter throws and getting the ball out of Russell Wilson's hands. Is that a bad fit for Metcalf? At least have to ask that question.
He's got to dominate after the catch, which was part of his secret sauce in the first 8 games of last season. Almost 6 yards after contact per catch in the first 8 games, and that fell to 3.3 in the second half. His target volume was almost the same. It was down a little bit, maybe 1 target per game from the first 8 to the second 8, and he just wasn't getting as many touchdowns. I don't have the numbers on like end zone targets or red zone opportunities from the splits here, but obviously that offense took a big turn in the second half of last season. Russ was throwing 5 fewer passes per game. They weren't comfortable with the way defenses were playing them. I think it does come down to just how they reconfigure this offense and try and beat the cover 2 shell.
By the way, I want to just go back to Tyreek Hill. We keep talking about Tyreek Hill not going to get the same amount of targets as these other guys, and I don't think anyone's going to care about this. I'm just going to tell you anyway. I've told you this before. It's been a pretty big sample of games without Sammy Watkins over the last 3 years. In 2018, he averaged in 7 games without Watkins, 9.6 targets per game for Tyreek Hill. He played 1 game in 2019 without Watkins. He had 10 targets. And in 2020, in 5 games without Sammy Watkins, not including week 17 when Mahomes didn't play, 10 targets per game. So that's is 13 games over the last 3 seasons without Watkins and with Mahomes, and he's averaged 10 targets per game.
They probably should do that. They should. And if they did, he might be the number 1 wide receiver in fantasy.
And let me follow up on that, because they did do that after the first 6 games of the season. And this is when they traded for Le'Veon Bell, and it really had nothing to do with Le'Veon Bell, but they just changed their offense and they said, we're going to stop running the ball. We're going to just throw. And I'm trying to find the numbers now, but at that point, Mahomes, or from the last 9 games for Tyreek Hill, from week 7 on, Mahomes threw like 40 times a game, and Hill was on pace for, I think he was averaging more than 10 targets per game. And his numbers were ridiculous. So it might happen. Not going to be good news for Clyde Edwards-Helaire if that happens, but
Yeah,
No.
if I projected Tyreek Hill for 10 targets per game, he would probably be wide receiver 1 or 2.
And even if you don't project him for 10, he averaged 9 overall last year. He was at 8.6 in 2018, which was Mahomes' big breakout year. 2019, when Mahomes got hurt, he was at 7.4 targets per game. So he's always had good to great target share.
Yeah.
I don't know if we should even. I can live with 9. I can live with 8.6 per game from him.
Yeah.
Because I know he's got these big plays that he will unfurl every few catches. Honestly, it's not necessarily every few games.
Yeah, it's just that question of whether he has the 120 catch upside.
All right, so
120 catches, that's a lot different, right?
So the last 9 games, his 16 game pace in those 9 games, 110 catches, 1,586 yards, 20 touchdowns on 172 targets.
Yeah, let's project him for exactly that.
Yeah, if he can be, if he's 110 catches, and was that including playoffs?
No,
because he was absurd, and he had 10 or 11 targets in each playoff game. He had 355 yards in 3 games too.
Yeah.
So he's pretty good.
If he does that, he might be your number 1 overall pick. In fantasy. If we could just pencil that in now, let's make sure that happens. And remember, Ben Gretsch talked about this on our Tuesday night live stream a week ago. He said a lot of receivers, they get those pop passes. Those are free PPR points. Tyreek gets those, and he gets those in the red zone.
Yes, he does.
He gets those inside the 5. The Chiefs have started to figure out and get creative with how to combat the tight space that defenses have the luxury of having when you're inside the 5-yard line. And instead of smashing it between the A and B gaps, they can get creative with Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. Hill benefits. That's what helped boost up those targets last year.
Okay, so that was a lot on Tyreek Hill, and I think he's really interesting because I do wonder if people would have I wouldn't say guts, but if people would actually take him lower than wide receiver 2 in a full PPR league. You can make the case, but you have to think about the touchdowns. Mahomes is just probably going to throw a lot more touchdowns than Kyler Murray,